All right, we are back. I'm not even wearing my microphone. Look at this crazy stuff. We are back. We're back for tonight, live from Los Angeles. This is your host, Young Brando. We are going to continue to talk watches. We're going to cover the part two, the remaining watches from the Phillips Hong Kong Toki watch auction, which, by the way, is happening tomorrow or already today in Hong Kong. It is a collection of watches that focus on the Japanese culture of collecting. We have looked at some of the watches. We are going to see if we can actually go through everything else today. And for that, I've set a rather ambitious goal in the chat. 10 super chats of $5 or more, and we will keep this going until midnight. If not, I'll try to see where my energy takes me and whether people jump on the panel, and I'll try to cover as many watches as I can. The link is pinned there if you want to join the panel, if you want to talk watches with me. Anyone and everyone is welcome, but we are going to be looking strictly at the Toki watch auction, which is happening on November 22nd in Hong Kong. Now, we have looked at some of the stuff yesterday, and I'm going to start with a couple of fan favorites. You guys know the 5-digit Rolexes are some of my favorites, and certainly when it comes to the Daytona, this is a category that offers quite a lot. I think, relatively speaking, a lot of value to begin with. The Daytona craze in certain ways may have subsided along with the rest of everything else that was perhaps a little bit overvalued on the secondary market, but that doesn't mean that its place as a Rolex icon and overall as one of the most important modern sports watches is in any way shaken. And when you think about it, the 5-digit is where all of this started. A lot of people, of course, situate the beginning of all modern watch hype to that turn of the century, turn into the new millennium, where Rolex introduced their in-house chronograph movement, which was a first for them, with the 116520 Daytonas. But it was already a watershed moment in 1988 when Rolex introduced self-winding movements into their sports chronograph range and practically ended up reviving the interest in their chronographs, using at the time the base of Zenith El Primero caliber 400. Of course, there were a number of modifications that Rolex applied, which included reducing the beat rate, removing the date, but also improving the shock protection of the movement, to speak very roughly. And considering, I think, how the visual aesthetics of a modern Daytona were really set in place with this 5-digit series, with the 16520, I think it might be a good moment to start looking into these watches very seriously. I know a very good friend of mine and our community member, Jake Brooks, aka Jake Brooks, also goes by JB, has bought one of these now a while ago at my suggestion, and he has not looked back ever since. And I think these are only going to gain in value over the next 5 years to a decade. Again, I don't make investment advice on this channel, but if you love the Daytona, if you want to add one to your collection and somehow can't stomach the way prices have gone on the secondary markets, somehow can't really or don't really want to pay some of these premiums, this is where you need to look at now. At lot 2 and 3 of the Phillips Hong Kong Toki auction, of which the link I'm posting in the chat now. Seb Nelly, what's up? Big up yourself.
Yo.
How are you doing?
Well, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. For a second, with the different name and the way your voice was coming, I couldn't quite tell if you were actually making a comeback or if it was someone trying to, troll me. But
you never know. Yeah, I don't think there's probably me and you are the only person that knows who that avatar is.
Yeah. So we're looking at the Rolex Toki, Phillips Hong Kong Toki auction, which focuses on Japanese collector culture. I was trying to wax poetic about 16520 as a reference, and they have very special examples of them at lot number 2 and 3. Guys, you know the deal on this channel generally. Hit the like in advance because you can depend on me for good horological content. If you do have any special requests, especially now that we have a super chat goal that might carry us all the way into midnight, feel free to chip in with a super chat of $5 or more with your request, with your watch question, with really a specific lot that you can direct our attention to, and I will discuss that lot in as much detail as I can muster. In either case, you don't necessarily have to care about the super chat goal or contribute necessarily toward it. If you have a question, feel free to pop that in with a super chat. I have posted the link to the auction listings. Pick and choose. Feel free to direct the course of the program. It's really in your hands. Let's roll with it. This is the white dial version. It's a new old stock piece. So all stickered up, full set, clearly released and into the Japanese market and purchased in Japan, all the way down to the case back sticker, of course, which is again Japanese market specific, seemingly on top of another case back sticker, which is an interesting amount of excessive packaging, as you can see also from the wrapping. What's your inclination, Basil? Are you a white dial / Panda Daytona or black dial Daytona guy?
I'd probably go Panda. I do like, that true, like the fully blackened, with chronograph register, but with the white dial, it's still sharp with the kind of the keeping, just that, those black rings.
I like that. I also think that the white dial, especially when you go to this neo vintage category, so to speak,
right,
where you can easily remove the bracelet and pop it on a leather strap, it's a little more versatile, I find. Right? This can certainly look like a very classy relatively compact watch, and that's one of the appeals of the Rolex Daytona anyways, right? You know, in the still with the modified, with the renewed case, it's one of those Rolex models that have timeless proportions, that are not really bloated up or enlarged in a massive way compared to how they traditionally were,
Right.
at least in the self-winding age, right? Of course, hand-wound Daytonas are smaller creatures, so to speak. But I think I incline towards the white dial example for the so-called Zenith Daytona as well. And they really have a wonderful piece here at lot 2 of the Phillips Hong Kong watch auction that's going to happen tomorrow on November 22nd. And the estimated value of the piece is set in the range between 19,200 to 29,500 in US dollars.
That seems pretty fair for a fully stickered, you know, literally what, you know, dead stock is kind of the terminology that comes to mind, that's kind of,
Right.
you know, made famous in the sneaker world. But, you know, just an untampered with, you know, it's, you want to wear it, but you know, you'd acquire a piece like that and be like, it just, you know, to me, like, it almost like by default, it becomes a safe queen. You know, you want to preserve that pristineness.
You know, that's always a tricky situation, because what I really like, you know, I've said this on my channel so many times. I've never bought any of the serious luxury watches in my collection at retail, right? I've always bought on the secondary market, and one of the things that have an appeal for me on the secondary market, beyond obviously the fact that I love a great deal, as we were talking about earlier, is that, you know, they're broken in. It hurts much less to put your first ding onto the watch. So I would be personally investing my money to an honest, unpolished, beautiful example of the 16520, rather than all stickered up new old stock or dead stock, as you said, version of it. And my reasoning is because if I actually invested in an example like that, I'll be tempted to keep it that way as well. And
Sure.
where's the fun in that?
Yeah, and really too, like, the thing to consider is just the simple nature of unstickering a watch of that vintage, right? Like, you're gonna get, when you take, you really can't just easily unpeel the sticker as it were to be new. You know, it would come with a little bit of a, you'd almost have to have it, you know, polished or cleaned after the fact to kind of get that residue off, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's well. At any rate, the other thing I was going to say is, you know, from an enthusiast's perspective, like, you know, from a content creator's perspective, these kinds of thematic Phillips auctions are always very exciting, because they bring together watches that we don't always see next to each other, that we don't always think about together. So it's always great to talk about them. But a watch like this, I would probably not want to buy in a Phillips auction, because there will be very serious collectors there, full room, people who are heated up, really willing to buy these watches. You know, they arrive sometimes, like, you know, for example, in Geneva, they arrive a couple of days in advance with a great excitement to spend that money, and it's going to go out of their pocket. You know, it's been set aside already anyway. So if they miss out on an opportunity on a watch that costs $1 million or $2 million, picking up a Daytona at $50K, for example, doesn't, you know, a new vintage Daytona at $50K, it doesn't hurt, right? You know,
Right.
So my suggestion is always, for these kinds of references where they're enough examples on the market, where there are enough decent examples on the market. If you're not in love with the provenance of what an auction house has to offer, if you don't really have to have it in a certain way, say a full set and whatever else, it's much better to bide your time on the secondary market and hunt for the best deal. Brian Tonnet is back. It's the YB show. Nice to see you, man. It's been a long time since I saw that name in any chat, so hit the like for Brian Tonnet, guys.
Definitely.
And C3D now says, was in Buenos Aires, Argentina last month. A Rolex dealer offered a two-tone Daytona with diamonds on the bezel for $32K USD, including tax. You know what? That's the funny thing. I remember when this exhibition only shtick was just coming onto the scene with Rolex dealers. And they had they first had a white dial and then a black dial two-tone Daytona with diamond hour markers in the case. And one time I wanted to see it, and she handed it to me, and she made a point of saying, like, it's exhibition only, and I must have given her such a look. She completely cracked up. I mean, because if you are going to make a dummy watch, it's not going to be a two-tone Daytona with a diamond dial, right? She wasn't fooling anyone. So I said, after laughing together, I said, I'm not a big fan of diamonds on the dial anyways. But these are the kinds of watches, by the way, C3D now, not to play down what you were offered in Buenos Aires, but those are the kinds of watches that you might walk into a dealer, even as your first purchase, even in a town where you are just a guest, when you're just passing through, and they might have it in stock. They might have it in the vault. A two-tone Explorer, Explorer 1, Sea Dwellers, in stainless steel and in two-tone. These are watches that you can get at retail. You might have to chance into it. You might have to wait 3 to 6 months. But these are watches that you can genuinely get. So let's try to dispense with that myth a little bit, where Rolex still can't be gotten at retail. Sure, maybe the first time you walk into a store and ask for the hottest model, they might laugh you away. But if you're asking for something reasonable, and if you make 1 or 2 visits, chances are that those things might come your way in a couple of months.
Right. Yeah, I think it comes down to like that. If it's over retail, the odds are you're not going to get it at retail. But
Sure.
if it's something that may sell at retail or slightly under, then you definitely are increasing your odds. And I think a lot of it does definitely play into your market, where you're at, for availability of just supply and demand.
That's a great rule of thumb, Basil. Thank you for emphasizing that. Thank you. I will underline it as well. Everyone has Chrono 24, at their, on their thumbs or on their keyboard, wherever these days. So it's when you look at the market, yes, the listings are usually overpriced. Sometimes they're just trying to see if anyone can take a bite. They use stock pictures and whatever. But when you use common sense in sifting through these listings and they check them a few different times. What was that? The monster inside me, I think, just jumped out. When you check these things a few times, if not necessarily frequently, you get a sense of where a decent example of a watch that you are aspiring to trades. And like Basil said, if that price is at or right under the retail price, Rolex is a great example for that, there's a good chance that you can get those pieces with reasonable lead times through actual points of retail. And if a piece is trading at, trading with a premium of 20%, 25%, 30%, possibly more, chances are you are not going to get that piece at retail as your first purchase. That's a great rule of thumb to have. Turtle Knight, that's a great joke. What is a Chrono 24? JD says upvoted. Turtle Knight says upvoted. Ivor says what's up, YBM Basils. Loose Tooth OC says got the call for a new sub date or a solid gold black sub. Turned both down. See, sub date is another piece that you can actually get sometimes almost instantly, sometimes again with a reasonable lead time.
That's a great one to get. How can you go wrong?
Yeah, it's a classic. You cannot go wrong, even though I'm obviously team no date, but yeah, nothing wrong at all with a classic Submariner date, which is obviously just as iconic at this time. I Heart Maldives asked the question behind the scenes. I don't know if you're listening to the live stream too, Maldives, but the question is, because we were also talking earlier about through Basil's unboxings, what would be the one Rolex that you would hold in your collection? And he's basically saying a vintage Submariner, a hand-wound Daytona, and the original Explorer 2. Honestly, I would always prefer the vintage Submariner. I love Daytonas. I've come to love Daytonas. They were not even on the periphery of my interest 3 to 5 years ago, but I've come to appreciate them a great deal. And my sweet spot for them is 16520. It's not because I don't appreciate the classic vintage hand-wound pieces. It's just they are so unreasonably out of my range for the most part. At least the ones that I'm really pining for, that I try to forget about them for the most part. The Explorer 2, the classic 1655, I think it's the kind of watch that immediately marks you as a watch aficionado, right? Because it looks so different. It was so off the wall for its time in terms of the aesthetic when it came to Rolex sports watches. And in many ways, the classic 1655, even though some of the aesthetic codes have been carried into the modern 1655, is just a very unique watch, right? I remember seeing it on an older gentleman's wrist in the Frieze art show when it started making its way to Los Angeles, and I made sure to make eye contact with the guy and just give him this knowing nod, and he understood immediately what I meant as well, because whoever recognizes a vintage Explorer 2 in the wild, right? Unless you're really into watches.
Someone gets it.
So, I mean, Explorer 2 is great. Hand-wound Daytona is great. Those are great icons, some of which I can't even touch in terms of, my collection. But, if it's one Rolex that I have to have beyond my personal story and whatever else, I would still go with a classic Submariner, no date.
Yeah. Kind of like the way it was intended, right? Like the way it was developed, designed, just simple, clean aesthetic, made to dive, just rugged workhorse tool watch.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, not that the date is necessarily a faux pas, because again, with the Cyclops and everything, it's just as canonical, right? That's, in fact, more people think of that look when they visualize a Submariner than the classic no date.
Yeah.
Again, I'm trying to lay my own bias aside here.
Sure. I guess, as a tool watch, being a tool watch, that simplicity, like if you're diving, you don't need to know the date. You just need to know the time. You need to follow along that way. And, and I get it. Yeah. Like the date, the Cyclops, and just the design language of Rolex of having that Cyclops. But yeah, I guess, there's definitely an argument for both, but I get the purist, of wanting that no date.
So lot number 3 of the Toki auction, speaking of classic Rolexes that have no date indicator on the dial, a Daytona would be an example. This is the 5-digit. This is the one that is powered by the caliber 4030, which was in turn based on one of the first automatic chronograph movements in the world, the Zenith El Primero caliber 400. Look, I mean, black dial with patinated loom on the dial. That's a classic look in vintage or neo-vintage. This particular piece is apparently not as pristine as lot 2 we were looking at, but virtually new old stock, they say, and it does look quite clean, even though not all wrapped up and stickered up like lot 2 with the white dial. And it has a similar estimated value, in fact the same estimates, that is set in the range between 19,200 to 29,500. Basil, because you were with me on the live stream before and you're here now really putting in the work, I want to look at least a couple of lots that perhaps caught your fancy. Did you click the link and browse a little bit? Are there any lots that you want us to talk about, highlight, or that perhaps you want to say something about?
To be fair, I actually haven't really dived too deeply into the to the availability, into the the pieces at that. So
Okay.
I'm open to to kind of pick and pull, if maybe if anybody in the chat has any input, or yourself, I'm happy to kind of see what's out there.
Okay, so let's continue running with it. If something else comes to mind, and guys, of course, there is the link once again. Feel free to direct my attention.
Sure.
This is lot 9, which is a Patek Philippe Aquanaut reference 5066A-010. These were limited edition, colorful stainless steel versions made for the Japanese market as early as 1997. And obviously, the Aquanaut came out in the form that we recognize today, with that semi-glossy embossed dial that had early on a grenade-like look, kind of testifying to its military origins, testifying to its kind of luxury field watch origins, so to speak. Of course, the Arabic numerals are part of that aesthetic as well. And of course, in the stainless steel case, in combination with a rubber strap that complements that dial design as well. Well, early on, they also did a run of limited edition pieces in various colors. And the reference 5066 had a sapphire case back and had this interesting blue dial with a rubber strap to match it. The lot essay says it was made in extremely limited quantities, and the number they indicate there is 500 pieces. So clearly a very rare occasion or interesting chance occasion to get this watch. It does come with a black rubber strap that matches the embossed dial. There's also an extra leather strap with contrast stitching, which would be a great complement as well. I'm thinking, of course, of my 14800 with the military dial, AP's response in a way to the Aquanaut. You see, it even has a matching presentation box in addition to all the papers, as well as a certificate of origin. Here's the exhibition case back. Of course, you're looking onto a movement of that vintage, which carries the seal of Geneva on one of its bridges. A slightly quirky, out-of-field example of a very popular piece. Of course, perhaps more desirable in its quote-unquote jumbo contemporary iterations like the 5167A. But increasingly, the vintage versions are coming into a certain appreciation, especially because people really like that grenade looking dial, and I think this is very cool. Yeah, it is, John Galt, it is 36. And again, guys, we have a somewhat ambitious goal for super chats to take it until midnight and not maybe until 10. So for an extra 2 hours. So if you have any questions, if you want us to look at any of the lots, feel free to send in a super chat of an amount of $5 or more, and that will certainly help. This is a 36 millimeter piece, as mentioned, and the pre-auction estimate is set in the range between 41,000 to 82,100 in US dollars. That was lot 9 for a Japanese limited edition of the Patek Philippe Aquanaut with a blue dial and on a matching blue rubber strap with all its bells and whistles, box and papers. Reference 5066A-010.
The markers really did age very nicely.
Right?
It's a very consistent, it's that kind of that custard, patina.
Yeah. And by the way, sometimes people marvel at this. Sometimes people think that it's fishy or whatever. But if you go into this vintage era, into the neo-vintage era, where these brands were still using tritium, a lot of times the suppliers for the dial and the hands are different. So the mix of the tritium luminous material they use is also different.
Of course, yeah.
So it's normal for the hands to age in a different way than the markers on the dial. And I think there is a sense of evenness here, at least within the hands and within the dial markers, that is very pleasant overall. But it's not exactly matching. And for
Right.
my part, I actually get more suspicious and confused when things are perfectly matching on the dial, right?
Right.
Everything pointing towards the best possible example. That makes me a lot more anxious about
Sure.
the actual provenance of a watch than something that's even and pleasant, but not quite perfect.
Right. Yeah, within an imperfection, like to be perfectly imperfect across the board, be it the hands and the loom on the actual, dial itself, it's yeah, exactly what you said. And it's good, obviously you don't want a the hand, the service hands that may even have like more of a luminova, crossover,
Yeah,
and
that's
getting away from
possible.
the tritium isn't so hot. So yeah.
Yeah, that's. But I think this is a
Yeah.
beautiful example. Great set of a rare iteration um, of a neo-vintage Aquanaut. So for collectors who want to perhaps venture out a little bit, who like a blue dial, who have perhaps a more modern Aquanaut in their collection, but want to complement it with something with an earlier origin, maybe that could be an interesting piece to pick up.
Definitely.
That seems interesting. The Pasha chronograph. Amazing. I saw the sucker ball, knew there was something interesting about it, and there we go. The Cartier Pasha, Jarajanta's design for Cartier that was introduced in 1985. He was given the brief of making a waterproof, sporty watch for them that kind of rehearses some of the nautical themes that he used in his designs previously. And he came up with something quite different. It was ostensibly, or at least as an idea, based on a watch that Cartier made, a waterproof watch Cartier made in a bygone era for the Pasha of Marrakesh, hence the name of the watch. Honestly, you can see, again, if you are really obsessed with Janta's design, you can see the same kind of interplay between different geometric shapes, like the square center dial, round dial overall, and a round case. Of course, the canteen cap for the crown, or the canteen guard of the crown, is itself kind of playing around with that water/nautical theme. There's a dive time bezel here, which once again plays with the same. And this is a chronograph version that was made with a in gold, and as a limited edition of 35 pieces for the FIFA World Cup that was held in Japan and Korea. That was the first time the FIFA World Cup was hosted by more than one country. And I think it was also the first time it ventured out of its usual sphere, which was once in Europe, once in South America, right? It used to go more or less back and forth.
Sure.
Of course, there was the 94 US,
Hmm.
which took it a little bit further north, but that was kind of the case. Once in the Americas, once in Europe, once in the Americas, once in Europe, and then suddenly there was Japan, Korea, and the trajectory of organizing World Cups completely changed. So for that, it can be quite significant. Of course, there's not one but two details that amplify that theme. The running second subdial at 6 o'clock is decorated to resemble a soccer ball, and the rotational bezel is actually ended at 45 minutes, which of course corresponds to a half
A half, yeah.
soccer game. So that's very cool.
That is, yeah. I know. I noticed the soccer ball, chronograph. When I looked at it, I was like, oh, it looks just like a soccer ball. There it is. Boom.
Yeah, I knew already that it was soccer themed, of course, but
Right.
I did not realize that it was a limited edition made for the World Cup that was co-organized or co-hosted rather by Japan and Korea in 2002.
Yeah. Yeah. Hublot didn't scoop it up, I guess, somehow.
That's funny. Apparently, they also made a white gold version of this, limited to 70 pieces as well. The reference 2111 for the Pasha chronograph was produced in 35 examples in yellow gold, which is an interesting inversion, right? In a lot of limited editions, usually white gold is rarer, but here they decided, of course, to match the yellow gold with that beautiful solid gold trophy, which in itself is, I think, a beautiful thing.
Definitely.
This one apparently is number 32 out of 35. And it is one of those lots that will start with no reserve on November 22nd. It has an estimated value set in the range between 5,100 to 7,700. Loose Tooth OC, thank you so much for this generous super chat. $9.99, lot 45 or 96. Since you are the first and so far the only super chat for this live stream, we will honor both lots that you indicated. We will give you value for money, and let's start with lot 45.
I think that's only fair.
Oh, nice. Lot 45 is an actual Japanese watch. Now, I'm not saying this to be facetious, because at the end of the day, the theme of this auction is on Japanese collecting culture. So it's not only Japanese independent makers like Hajime Asaoka or Nayahida or Seiko and Grand Seiko and whatever else that is presented in this auction, but anything and everything that pertains to the Japanese culture of collecting watches, which has been traditionally a very strong market. And in terms of the collecting culture, perhaps only second to the Italian market, and possibly because of its uniqueness and increasingly common limited editions that are directed to it, perhaps one of the most important historically. Now, we looked at a lot of watches that were first sold in the Japanese market, a lot of watches that were made for the Japanese market in terms of a limited or exclusive edition. Here we're looking at the top of the line, absolute pinnacle of watchmaking when it comes to Seiko's own lines. Credor is their super watch, basically. It's their line that has the most handwork, most precious elements, and most exclusive materials as well. Here we're looking at a platinum piece in 35 millimeters of diameter. The Eichi also has a porcelain dial. And as you can probably tell, even from this photograph, a lot of hand inked elements as well. There's a power reserve indicator that you can see which pivots at 10 o'clock. Beautiful hand-painted blue enamel details, blued hands, of course. And in addition to those markers, there are also faint numerals, which probably serve as a cipher that refers to 24/7, 24 hours and 7 days, which is a signature Credor allusion to that constant ethic of working.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I've actually noticed that 24/7 Embassy theme on other Credors. And Credor is just one of those brands where, if you go back, there wasn't really like a huge premium on Credor. It was kind of in line, with kind of Seiko as a whole, but they really just took Credor and they just shot it into an upper hemisphere. They're really impressive watches.
Again, beautiful, simple watch, sweep center seconds, power reserve indicator, which, I like power reserve indicators, period. Sometimes people find them superfluous on the dial because of symmetric reasons. Sometimes people get enraged when they appear on self-winding watches. But here, obviously, this is a hand-wound piece with a beautiful movement, by the way, very classically decorated, and very shrewdly designed as well, right? You can see a crescent here that corresponds with a ruby, which is just an exposed wheel. This, by the way, ends up, of course, exposing the mainspring barrel. You technically have an organic power reserve indicator on the back too, of course. But yes, sometimes people want the power reserve indicator on the back, like embedded into a bridge of the movement or something. Here you have a beautifully open worked cap over the mainspring barrel, where you can see how tight it is.
Fair tension.
And whether it needs rewinding. There was also the small detail. I don't know if you peeped it when I quickly scrolled through here. There's a porcelain cap that has that calligraphic symbol of Credor on the crown as well. I think the case design is amazing, very unique, right? It's not just another Calatrava iteration,
Right.
by a brand. You know, it's a very classic looking dress watch, but it doesn't look like another Calatrava, whether we are talking about the Patek numbers or so many various classical iterations of them made by Vacheron, Audemars, Jaeger-LeCoultre, and so many others, of course. Beautiful.
Definitely.
Beautiful piece. And this is the modern Credor, as Basil mentioned, is completely lifted over into a different sphere compared to all the other offerings from Seiko and Grand Seiko. They're usually extremely limited by nature, by production, but this specific piece is in fact part of a 25-piece limited edition, as limited editions should be, right? It doesn't really make sense to have limited editions for, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 examples. At least that's my stance on it. Is there anything else that I would like to add? What do you think, Basil? Do you have something to add?
I just feel it would pair like really well with like maybe like a blue strap, like that. Just something that would kind of accent,
Sure.
the actual hour, and minute, and even
I think it,
seconds.
I think it may have been originally offered. If you peep this picture very quickly,
Sure.
it may have been originally offered on one such strap, but this is their presentation. By the way, of course, it's just a pin buckle, not a déployant, but that's a matching platinum buckle as well. So it's not like they have skimped out
Sure.
there and matched with white gold or something. But I think this is a very appealing package. And I don't know, again, in the auction world, there's always, you get a good deal if something falls through the cracks. Chances are, in an auction dedicated to Japanese watch collecting and Japanese watches, this will probably not fall through the cracks. However, lot 45 has a relatively conservative estimate, considering the quality, the exclusivity that it represents, the pinnacle of Japanese watchmaking that it embodies, and that estimate is between 35,900 to 55,100. This is the Credor Eichi reference GBLR 999 platinum dress watch with a porcelain dial, beautiful handmade details, elegant simplicity, redefined. That was lot 45. Captain, thank you so much for the super chat. And guys, please hit the like button. That always helps. Lot 33 or 87, your choice. Congrats, Basil. Nice pieces. Again, because that's only the second super chat of the day, I will do both. But others, if you want to chip in more and get us actually even closer to our goal, only 8 more super chats of $5 or more to go, please feel free.
Thank you so much, Captain.
So lot 96 was Loose Tooth's next request, and that is a classic Tudor sub. What do you think? Basil?
I like it. Yeah, snowflake hands and all, looking good.
Yeah, look, this blue Tudor sub is such a classic that it had to make a comeback in some way or fashion into the Tudor line, and when it did, It was a big hit. It carries all the signature elements that Tudor today uses in their aesthetic. Obviously, the snowflake hands are the big part of it. But otherwise, of course, this comes from an era of Tudor, from the early 70s specifically, where a lot of what made Tudor was made with Rolex parts, right? This was essentially an entry-level Rolex watch with a generic movement, but a Rolex case, but a Rolex bracelet, but with a different branding and also slightly different aesthetic sometimes. But otherwise, this actually looks very similar to my sub, right? You know, it carries a very close family resemblance to the reference 5513, for example.
Sure. Yeah, it's just enough to give it kind of its own identity, but at the same time have that DNA, being at like the crown, having the the Rolex crown, and little like stampings like on the bracelet. It kind of has that the tie-ins where you kind of feel like it is part of Rolex. But
Yeah.
whether having like just the Mercedes hands, things like that, it's like, okay, is it just kind of a homage to a Rolex? It's a nice kind of a blend of it all, I feel.
Yeah. And again, this is just a beautiful example. You know, look at that blue dial that also has kind of a almost like a grained patina going on. The hands and hour markers have all patinated beautifully in maybe slightly different shades of eggshell, so to speak. And yeah, you see the crown on the crown. You see the crown on the clasp of the bracelet. You see, of course, the stamping on the back, original oyster case by Rolex. So it carries, like Basil so beautifully explained, that brand DNA, but it is a different package, slightly different visuals, which to some can be more appealing, right? Tudor, vintage Tudors have always had kind of a subgenre of collectors, and I think honestly, any fan of the Rolex Submariner period would be, I think, very proud and lucky to own an example like this, especially presented in a set like this. Again, you have the box and papers, the Tudor Japanese guarantee stamped by Kikuchi Japan, with the purchase date as April 27th, 1977. The hang tag is there, and even the outer packaging for the fitted presentation box as well. Lot 96 is presented with an estimate of 9,600 to 19,200. Again, I think it's very hard, since it's a popular auction, to see where it would land, but somewhere in the middle of that estimate, considering the beauty of this particular example, I wouldn't resent, honestly. It's you can, by the way, for that price point, you can get pretty decent examples of the 5513 as well, just to keep that in mind. But maybe for one reason or another, perhaps for aesthetic reasons, perhaps others, you like this more. And in that case, this is such a stunning example. MCM
Absolutely.
says, cheers, Captain. Thank you so much.
Nice.
We are yet one step closer to our super chat goal. So maybe we will, in fact, go to midnight. Who knows? Maybe I will be surprised with 7 other super chats of $5 and more, and we'll go for the whole way. But certainly, I'm here at least for another hour. So keep them coming. Keep the questions coming. Keep the requests coming. Captain, we're going to start your requests with lot 33. And thank you, MCM, for even adding more. I talked about this yesterday. Sorry, not yesterday, 2 days ago, and I was just posting on it on my Instagram because I don't think it was coincidental. De Bethune themselves posted examples of lot 32 and 33 next to each other on Instagram. And they're both going under the hammer on November 22nd. Of course, JPS is actually an entirely watch geek terminology in reference to these sorts of captivating combinations of black and gold. It originates in the kind of phrase that watch guru John Bolt, the watch dealer, came up with when thinking about vintage gold Daytonas with black dials that had an aesthetic that reminded him and that really recalls the John Player special livery of that legendary team Lotus. So it felt perhaps appropriate for De Bethune to use the JPS abbreviation, the JPS moniker, when they came up with this very pleasant combination of black and gold for their Grand Sport watch, their version of a dive watch in 2022. The Grand Sport series were, I believe, introduced earlier in 2019. One of the tiny, geeky, but also entirely fun aspects of this watch is that it has a manual dial light, right? Like like Casio watches, except of course it is actually powered by a winding mechanism, so entirely mechanical, but activated on demand by the push of a button at 6 o'clock.
That is really neat.
It really is. I mean, in person too, it's very charming. Obviously, the most unique and important aspect of the watch, with all those inserts and accents, you have both this kind of black zirconium backdrop complemented by golden titanium polished grade 5 elements, and it's really a great combination of the matte black of the black zirconium and the golden sheen of all these other elements, most of which are polished grade 5 titanium.
And now with the lugs, do they have like a little bit of like a flex to them?
Yes, not only a little bit. So with this particular case design, right? There are 2 or 3 elements that aesthetically and technically distinguish at least some versions of de Bethune's lugs. The ogival or bullet-shaped ends here, the pierced aesthetic, right, which is both, I think, visually very nice and appealing, but also kind of a visual emphasis on the lightness of these pieces, because a lot of times they are made from lighter but reliable materials such as titanium or zirconium. And in this case, it's also the floating lug structure, which means that actually these are 4 pieces that in each case hinge at the midpoint of the case flank, so 3 and 9 o'clock, and that help the case sit as closely as possible to your wrist when you strap it on.
Sure.
So this, basically, these watches, and here we're talking about something that is 44 diameter on paper. It's the smallest 44 millimeter watch that I've ever worn.
Sure.
It even felt smaller in a way than the Sea Dweller 43 on my wrist. I think I have a couple of videos posted somewhere on my Instagram that I'm not gonna waste 10-15 minutes to pull up now, but it really is an ergonomic marvel in that case.
Yeah, no, it's really cool, and it really kind of opens the piece up for just so many different wrist sizes and shapes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there is of course the elapsed time right there in the form of an inner bezel of sorts. I mean, it's not really inner because it's something that you can see from the grooves here, something you can turn, right? Not something operated by another crown or something. But of course, that manual light at 6 o'clock kind of throws itself mostly on that periphery. And otherwise, of course, there is all the elements that distinguish de Bethune movements that this piece brings together. There's the titanium balance wheel, as you can see, again presented in that golden shade with white gold inserts that are designed to optimize for oscillations in temperature, and the de Bethune balance spring with the flat terminal curve and the triple parachute shock absorbing system, twin barrel movements, which has 5 days of power reserve at chronometric precision. This piece comes from its original Japanese owner, apparently excellent overall condition, the lot essay says, with its complete set of accessories and 2 additional rubber straps, which you can see here. Yeah, I like that kind of sailcloth strap as opposed to the classic rubber strap. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but what I also like here is with the buckle too. You have a design that plays with that pierced or hollowed out lug design as well. So very holistic design that flows really nicely together, and that black and gold accent is even repeated
Sure.
in the buckle as well. Thank you, Captain, again for bringing this up. This was lot 33 for the De Bethune Grand Sport watch, DB28, the JPS model, one of only 50, with an estimated value that ranges between 50,000 to 100,000 US dollars. Cap's second request was 87. Again, if you have any questions, if you want to draw our attention to a specific lot, or if you have any other watch-related questions at all, feel free to send in a super chat. This was incidentally also a watch that I talked about 2 days ago when I first started tackling this auction. In this case, probably it's one of those watches that has only the faintest connection to the Japanese market. But nevertheless, it's such a beautiful and important example of a classic Patek reference that I would be remiss not to discuss it. Some of you may have noticed that I disappeared off the screen. I am just grabbing more water. This is the 3970. The 3970, of course, is Patek's classic perpetual calendar chronograph, built on the base of the Lemania CH27 chronograph movement that has given us anything and everything, really, that involves a chronograph, from the Omega 321 that powered the Moonwatch to the base of a movement in AP that combines a chronograph and a tourbillon, classic hand-wound chronographs by anyone from Daniel Roth to Roger Dubuis, Vacheron Constantin, so many others. But of course, none perhaps as desirable as this 36 millimeter yellow gold case with fluted lugs. Classic square markers that are indicative of the first series, only made in yellow gold and in about 100 examples. Extremely well preserved. Almost like a two-tone dial, with a silver backdrop where the subdials are perhaps a shade darker. Snap-on case back. A really beautiful, beautiful piece from 1986. Apparently, it was manufactured in 1986, and the first series was made between that year and 88, and subsequently sold on February 3rd, 1987. And honestly, once again, you see a great set that includes not only the presentation box and the certificate of origin, but also an extract from the archives as well. very beautiful, almost stately watch. Again, the condition is fantastic, of course, with some patina on the case back especially, and pushers that you can see, but really almost impeccable. The snap-on case back. There's a profile view just so you can see the fluting on those lugs. And you see how the chronograph registers are kind of like in a more opaline shade against the silver backdrop of the dial.
The strap that's photographed in the that later picture, looks probably more to like the actual Patek, what the strap would have been, when it was new. The other strap almost looks like more of a, aftermarket. It has like the little easy, kind of adjuster to kind of take it on and off.
Honestly, I don't know, Basil. I have to look into it because oftentimes, we, from our perspective, we associate a lot of these classic dress watches with like alligator or croc straps almost immediately.
Sure.
But what I heard, especially from the 70s, now by the mid to late 80s, this may have changed. A lot of times they were apparently presented on classic calfskin straps.
Yeah, I think
Sometimes textured, of course. But you're right. Probably the second strap that they're showing here is a Patek OEM strap, whereas this is probably one of those that were made for the auction house.
right.
You're
Yeah, I
right.
saw that little spring bar. It was almost like too good to be true. Like, what's that? Yeah, it's a newbie.
And I don't know. I mean, this, whatever it is, I kind of like this look a little better on this watch, to be honest, the croc strap. And I know, like, the way to produce them is not necessarily quote unquote humane.
Sure.
And it's particularly unbecoming of me as a vegan. I don't expect those from anyone else, but I can't lie to myself. It looks pretty good. That kind of honey brown with vintage yellow gold, it's a pretty killer combination.
Indeed.
This is lot 87 for a first series Patek Philippe perpetual calendar chronograph from the reference 3970. Papers and box, as well as an archival extract. This piece has an estimated value set between 128,000 to 256,000 in US dollars. Thank you guys again for those 2 super chats and for the emphasis on those super chats with another super chat from MCM. Let's see how long I have for the goal. We have another 40 minutes. So I will be live for those 40 minutes in either case. But if another 7 super chats of $5 or more come, I will most certainly keep going until midnight. But there are so many watches to cover, so many watches that I want to cover as well. We will have plenty of content for the next 40 minutes for sure. Lot 17, simple enough, but also quite beautiful. We were talking about tourbillon wristwatches in our earlier live stream where Basil shared with us 3 new additions to his collection, but talked also specifically of one of his favorite pieces in the collection, which was an Angelus or Angelus tourbillon. And here we have at lot 17 a Vacheron Constantin tourbillon, platinum dress piece in slightly oversized 41 diameter, blue guilloche dial with a very striking pattern that seemingly emanates from the tourbillon cage. A limited edition of 6 pieces made to commemorate 25 years of the Hourglass Japan. Of course, the Maltese cross imagery is there as always in an open worked fashion with a single blued screw and arrow that helps that 1 minute revolution to also aid in indicating the seconds.
Sure.
Very shrewd. Another angle on that movement, which is wound by a peripheral rotor, where you can both enjoy to the fullest extent the decoration and details of that Geneva seal, Geneva pedigree movement and its bridges, and have that also view of the peripheral oscillation of that solid gold weight around the movement as well. So you both get the benefit of enjoying the decoration and the self-winding movement.
That's definitely doing it right. I mean, there's zero obstruction there.
Yeah, beautiful. Very nice stripes as well on the bridges. That's something I always enjoy. Some internal angles, certainly. Kind of an extra open working there at around 6 o'clock, so you can get a view of the tourbillon mechanism from the exhibition case back as well. Once again, you get the whole shebang. This is also number 1 of that 6-piece limited edition. So not only one off, but number 1 of the 25th anniversary piece for the Hourglass Japan.
I mean, besides having an example 0, how do you beat number 1, right?
Yeah, I mean, either the prototype or number 1, right? Nothing less.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe if there's a significant number that a series ended in, maybe whether it be like, I know 8, kind of has an outstanding, notoriety to it, could also maybe work too. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in Chinese culture, of course, 8 is a very auspicious number, so that can be the thing. But I think a lot of, there's a reason that a lot of brands these days just have one off, when it comes to limited editions, especially if it has more than like 10 pieces or something.
Sure.
So people don't fight over specific numbers and they save themselves that headache.
Absolutely.
But honestly, there's something always more special, I feel, when it's a numbered edition. I like that. Not that necessarily because I would want to chase after a specific number or an early number, but it's it's your number now, right? If you got
Right.
that watch, that's
Exactly.
that's good enough for me.
I know. Actually, it's funny with numbers where where I grew up. Number license plates were kind of all the rage, and folks that were kind of around for a while, or maybe they had some pull, in local ties. You're always fighting for those number plates,
Yeah,
the number license plates. It's kind of funny.
yeah, that's true. So this is lot 17 for a Vacheron Constantin traditionnel platinum tourbillon wristwatch with a blue guilloche dial, number one of limited edition, made to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the Hourglass, Japan. I will give a little bit of shine to one of my favorite independent brands, the power couple from Austria, Habring 2, standing for Richard Habring, who is the technical master behind this brand, the Austrian watchmaker who made the Doppelchronograph, the split seconds chronograph for IWC based on a module on the Valjoux 7750 movement, just as Kurt Klaus had earlier devised the famous perpetual calendar module on that same base. Richard Habring later established his own brand with his wife Maria Habring as the business mind, the business leader of the brand, and they really run a beautiful, beautiful brand there. This is a limited edition made in 20 examples for their Japanese retailer Shelman, and specifically for the 50th anniversary of that Japanese retailer. Classic dress watch, people go crazy about that Naoya Hida dress pieces with the small seconds at 9 o'clock. Here is the Habring version of that aesthetic with a classic two-tone sector dial with the hour markers giving you a kind of Art Deco sun aesthetic. Stainless steel, 38.5 millimeters in diameter. Beautiful leaf-shaped hands. Full set comes with the Habring 2 certificate stamped June 10th, 2023, and with the presentation box. That you can see here. And here's a look at the profile of the watch. Beautiful stainless steel dress watch with lots of throwback appeal. And here's a look at the movements, which is much more austerely decorated compared to a lot of other independents. But of course, the price point for Habring 2 is also extremely appealing, extremely reasonable compared to some of those independents as well. In this case, again, because you are in the heat of an auction and we are talking about a 20-piece limited run, it's not unreasonable to think that we can have a result above what seems like a conservative estimate, and that is 5,100 to 10,300 in US dollars.
It's a really cool brand. You know, they definitely they borrow obviously a lot from, you know, the other many companies that have kind of come before, but at the same time it's like uniquely them. So kudos to that.
Yeah, I think this is they make a fantastic watch for the money, and again, it's not the kind of piece that you would see on every next collector's wrist. No matter how much widely they have been recognized, they still make a very limited number of watches, and they still have that kind of even through the retailers, they have an almost direct to customer kind of relationship as well, where you can ask for small modifications,
Sure.
which really distinguish these pieces. And when they make a limited edition, they really put a special touch to it, and don't really repeat it. So this is a beautiful example of that, and a great stainless steel dress watch with lots of throwback / vintage appeal.
And I think Daniel Katz is actually acquiring a Hovering two piece
Oh, is that true?
from what I've been hearing. Yes. So it's pretty exciting for him. Yeah, it's good stuff.
That's great. That's great. I met Daniel Katz in Los Angeles as well.
Incredible.
Cool cat. Cool cat.
Yeah, indeed he is.
To pun on his last name, he's a cool cat. I mean, you know, if for those who are into Jewish lore among us, Katz also abbreviates something else as well, but it's usually used for its similarity to the German word for cat, which is Katze. But yeah, I love that last name and love the guy as well now that I've met him. Here's another piece, another European brand, a high horological brand that I love, and a limited edition they made. As for limited editions, this is one that pushes the limits of exclusivity. It's not one of a kind, but it's one of only 3 that was made for the Japanese retailer Kamine for their 110th anniversary. It's a stainless steel dress piece with a micro rotor movement, Breguet numerals on a white grand feu enamel dial. Again, a watch that is on the one hand very austere, very minimalist. On the other hand, a watch that has all those aesthetic details that have lots of appeal for, especially for collectors who have a taste for the vintage. And I have been mentioning that a lot of Japanese collectors have had that extensive and experienced approach to seasoned approach, let's say, to collecting watches. Breguet hands, Breguet numerals over a white grand feu enamel dial with small seconds at 6. Their classic Galet shape that takes inspiration from the natural process of formation that gives this rounded, smoothed out look to the pebbles that we find on our shores. You know, so it does look like a classic dress watch, but maybe with a rounded aesthetic, kind of an oversized crown. A beautiful micro rotor movement.
Oh yeah, I was expecting a great case back on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the rotor bridge, beautifully black polished, nicely detailed, snail decoration on the gold rotor weight itself. And of course, the Laurent Ferrier micro rotor movements have that again, we were talking about the peripheral rotor, right? And where that allows you to have an almost, well, a practically unobstructed view of
Right.
the decorated bridges of the movement. Micro rotor is, in a way, also similar to that. Of course, the other advantage of the micro rotor is, of course, since the oscillating weight is sunk at the same level of the bridges, you have a very slick, very thin movement overall.
Right.
Yeah, and it's of course the natural escapement system, which in this case is a silicon double direct impulse escapement that is inspired by Abraham Louis Breguet's iteration of it. Chalk flew up, $5. Thank you so much. Good choice to review. The Laurent Ferrier was just looking at that one. Thank you. Thank you. I'm always extra motivated by a super chat, but perhaps more so by having my good taste confirmed and affirmed by a member of the audience. So I appreciate that. Chalk flew up. Yeah, it's really a beautiful watch. Again, right next to the Habring we were just looking at, something that looks, or the Credor we were looking at earlier, right? Something that looks actually very minimalist, but offers a lot of distinction, a lot of beauty in a relatively small package. Again, I have a hard time believing that this will not jump over that estimate. The estimated value of the watch is $20,500 to $25,600 for this one of three limited edition stainless steel Laurent Ferrier Galet dress watch, micro rotor movements. Very unique in the way that it combines a stainless steel case with a Grand Feu enamel dial. Usually those kinds of details are preserved for precious, very precious metals indeed. And that's the kind of limited edition that the Japanese market deserves and that the Laurent Ferrier delivered. Very interesting watch at lot 20.
Absolutely.
This is another one that I really like. Not sure if I am ever into the whole rainbow color scheme or gem setting and whatever else goes. But I have always thought that Czapek Antarctic, which is their take on the integrated bracelet luxury sports watch concept, really came onto its own with this split-second chronograph. First of all, I think if any movement benefits from open working, this kind of display of its components on the side of the dial, I think it's a chronograph movement, and obviously a split-second chronograph movement with both of the column wheels vertically placed here, right on your line of sight. I mean, you can hardly see a better candidate for an open worked presentation, right?
Yeah.
It's I mean, I really like that, and it kind of gives a very different feel to a design that has been criticized many times for being generic before. I would say the Antarctic Rattrapante does not really look like anything else on the market. You may like it, you may hate it, but certainly it gives a very different spin to what they have been exploring with this design.
Now, is the rainbow effect we're seeing, is that like a translucent, or does it actually kind of prevent it from being like a true skeletonized?
So I'm checking the lot essay for that because it's not really an aesthetic that I've been familiar with from before. I don't know, actually. It doesn't really say in the lot essay either. Like I don't know how they achieved it.
Yeah,
I think it may simply be coloring of the parts if they actually achieved it by heat tempering certain components, that would make it even more impressive.
sure. Yeah.
But overall, even before going into this sort of limited edition of the Antarctic Rattrapante, which in this case was made in 8 pieces for the 350th anniversary of the Japanese department store Mitsukoshi. It's a very, very interesting piece, slightly oversized, at 42.5 millimeters in diameter. For someone like me who has tried on different variations of the Antarctique and is mostly much more content with the smaller version, this might be a little oversized, but it has a very unique dial side presentation of a split-second chronograph with, again, vertically placing in your view both. Why did it get stuck there? both of the column wheels, so you can actually observe the operation of the chronograph in real time. And on top of that, it also has a beautiful movement that takes after those open worked finger bridges of the Antarctic's classic movements, the micro rotor movements. But this is the SHX6 that is actually one with a full self-winding rotor. And it's a movement that was designed for Czapek by Aquanaut, which is led by Jean-François Mojon, who has collaborated in the past with brands as varied as Hermès and MBNF and Harry Winston and Trilob and many others. This is lot 22, and the piece has an estimated value set between 30,800 to 51,300. Now, I don't think by now that we will make the goal. 6 more super chats of $5 more in the remaining 12 minutes. Who knows? Maybe miraculously we will. But I want to talk about at least 3 more watches, and then we will see where it goes. Maybe I will get a second wind and continue. But if the super chats come in, I will most certainly continue. So let's leave it at that. Hit the like button, please. I'm already so grateful of all the contributions, especially to Basil, who has been with me, both for his three-peat unboxing earlier tonight, but also now here as well.
It's been fun.
But also to all of you who have so generously contributed during that live stream earlier and right here. Now, speaking of Roger Smith from earlier, this is probably the centerpiece of the Toki auction, lot 28, one of only 5 made. This is the Series 2 Edition 3 in 18 karat white gold, 38 millimeters in diameter. Made by the famous British watchmaker Roger Smith, powered by that classic manual single wheel coaxial escapement movement. Apparently delivered to a Japanese collector in January 2013. The set includes, in addition to the original bespoke presentation box and everything that came with it, also a service return box, leather travel pouch, and all the accoutrements. Of course, Roger Smith, in addition to his own unique place in watchmaking and his contributions to the development of that coaxial escapement movement, is also known and recognized as George Daniels's protege. He set off on his own into the new millennium, so to speak, starting in 2001. And Series 2 was his first round watch with the first fully in-house developed and made caliber using Daniels's coaxial escapement. Of course, the method of Roger Smith's watchmaking takes entirely after George Daniels's book, the so-called Bible of watchmaking, where you have described piece by piece, bit by bit, chapter by chapter, the making of a watch by a single watchmaker, by a single person, doing as much as possible, everything by hand, everything truly in-house. There are not many watchmakers remaining today who live up to that level of independence in watchmaking. And certainly Roger Smith is one of the only ones.
And really, wasn't he like Daniels's really only real main kind of protege?
Yeah, I mean, look, of course, F.P. Jean, Francois Paul Jean wants to make that claim at the very least, and he certainly had his work recognized by George Daniels, but no one has the kind of history and later on also extensive working relationship with George Daniels in the way that Roger Smith has had. Look at those beautiful purpled hands and how they stand against the various engine turned dimensions of that dial. Very beautiful. Again, I think overall what I wasn't surprised by this, but I was, I guess, pleasantly, or rather, overjoyed by seeing how we have a lot of examples of very special watches that are actually very muted, a lot of times relatively small as well in diameter, very minimalist, but have such incredible details and such an impeccable provenance that they're really distinguished. We saw a lot of watches like that, whether we are at this end of the spectrum with Roger Smith or with a Japanese maker such as Credor, with that very exclusive limited edition by Laurent Ferrier, or even the Habring 2 Art Deco style dress watch that we were looking at that was made by Shelman. All of these are very subtle, but also elegant and beautiful pieces.
Definitely.
This is lot 28 of Roger Smith, specifically a Series 2 Edition 3 in white gold. And the estimated value of the piece is 301,000 to 603,000 US dollars. That was lot 28. All right, maybe I have two more watches.
I think I can hang in there for two more.
Yeah, I mean, we are counting down almost 4 minutes. You know, maybe 5 super chats suddenly come in of $5 or more, and I go until midnight. Who knows? But in the meantime, please hit the like button. You know, we have more than 25 people watching, and I'm sure some of them have not yet hit that thumb. So I would really appreciate that. One more super chat just came in by Travis Watts, $10. In your opinion, is a modern Panerai worth a purchase? I understand there are contentions with the movements and value. Your thoughts? I will give you a very straight answer. But honestly, it's actually two answers. I think on the secondary market, there's a lot of value you can find. You know, the Panerai aesthetic is very distinct, and even if you don't necessarily buy into the history and how much the contemporary versions of the brands intersect, or contemporary watches of the brand intersect with that history, I think there's enormous appeal in them. Even as someone, you know, who is very small-wristed and can't really pull off those big watches, even I go through bouts, right? You know, where I want to buy a Panerai piece. Maybe not necessarily a 47 millimeter one, but a sizable one, not a 40 millimeter one either. Pushing all of that aside, I think at retail, the prices are exorbitant. On the secondary market, there's a lot of value. So if you actually like the piece, why not chase after one in the secondary market? I think Basil also can add a lot more to this from his own experience of ownership as well, right?
Sorry, I'm back. Yeah, no, absolutely. And in some cases, I mean, you might not even have an opportunity to buy it new. So secondary might be your avenue to acquire.
Yeah, again, you know, I'm in that mindset, right? You know, I think that's one of those watches that you probably don't want to buy at that you know, retail price, but you know, it's Maldives. Hi, young Brando, equivalent watchmaker who isn't as famous as Roger Smith or George Daniels. Obviously, I think that's the question. That you can buy without the hype, handmade watches. Now, this question is made a little more difficult by the fact that he retired and that he isn't a complete unknown. But Christian Klinks could be an interesting counterpart. German maker. Not I can't off the top of my mind tell you how many watches he created during the time he was active. But if you can, I know the level you operate at, Maldives, so I think you can afford one of these pieces. But I think we are still talking about a sizable sum, if not necessarily millions and millions of dollars, like a Roger Smith or George Daniels. I'm continuing to think in the same vein, because it's not immediately coming to me. I would say, Hajime Asoka is at that level as well, and as far as I know, he also creates most of everything by his own hand as well. And that's obviously pertinent when we are talking about the Toki auction. I want to say there's another Japanese maker that I'm forgetting. It will come to me in a little bit. It will come to me in a little bit. Because I think there were I need to look into that again. But Hajime Asoka almost immediately comes to mind for me. Because as far as I know, if not everything, he makes most of everything by hand, by his own hand. Hey, Patek Chris. How are you doing, man? 44 millimeter Luminors, that, if you like them, those are great. And on the secondary market, in the right moments, when the right deal appears, I don't see anything wrong. Again, you don't necessarily have to, you don't necessarily have to see them as what they call themselves high horology. I don't think Panerai has much to do with high horology. Even at the highest segment, at that price point, there's so much more that you can find elsewhere. You don't have to buy into the idea that these are the same watches that Italian frogman who guided missiles wore during the Second World War. I mean, you don't have to buy into that story to still like those watches and still find them attractive. I think for the right deal, they're certainly a good option. Speaking of that, let's talk about. I think we couldn't reach our goal, but that's Patek Chris. If they did have any chronometry standards, I wouldn't trust them. I wouldn't trust anything that Panerai says unless it's independently certified. with all due respect. Because, you know, again, all kinds of different brands do different kinds of fuck shit. Same with auction houses. But there are certain brands and certain auction houses that take the cake sometimes. You know, it's Panerai among watch brands and Antiquorum among auction houses, allegedly, both take the cake when it comes to that. So, speaking of independent Japanese makers, we are looking at lot 112 of Masa's Pastime. This is a piece made exclusively for the Toki watch auction. So it's a one of one. Shinohara, the Japanese watchmaker, is someone who specializes at restoring vintage watches. And he has, in the meantime, started creating his own line as well. The Nayuta model derives from his first name, and it means apparently an unfathomably large number in Buddhist terminology. These were, as Model A and Model B, introduced last year as the first two after the establishment of Masa and Company brand, encased in a stainless steel case that's a little short of 39 millimeters in diameter. I think the number is around 38.6. This is a time-only piece with an oversized subdial for a seconds hand. Silver dial engraved with a floral motif at its center, heat-blued steel hands, handmade, and the watchmaker's own design. An in-house movement that has a special engraving for this watch as Nayuta Model A, Toki, one of one. As you can see, this is the floral design that decorates the center of the dial, a very fine engine turn pattern for the oversized subdial of seconds. The hands are beautifully crafted. The font, as you can see, is quite unique. All the sectors are framed by a coin edge decoration as well on the dial. And here's a look at the in-house movement, which is uniquely decorated. And this one-of-one piece stands at lot 112, made for this auction, and it has an estimated value set in the range between 19,200 to 38,500. And last but not least, we are saying goodbye soon enough. If you have any last-minute questions, if you have if you want to do anything to support the channel and the work I've been doing here, feel free. Hey, The memberships give you access to some exclusive content behind the scenes, and I will find other ways of supplementing that content over the next month or so. So stay tuned. That's a great way. Buying a membership yourself, gifting some memberships is a great way of contributing to the channel. Super chats, super stickers, of course, always. You can leave comments as so-called super thanks as well. But if nothing else, share the link with fellow watch collectors and enthusiasts. Growing the channel in that organic word-of-mouth way is really, I think, the best way that you can make in the way of a contribution.
I have to agree.
Thank you so much. If nothing else, just hit the like button, leave a comment after the live stream ends, and it's going to somehow drive our channel forward. At the end of the day, this is a community, but small, a tight-knit community at that. And as Basil just affirmed, it's organic, plant-based, interested in in that kind of growth. So if you help it in that way, if you push it forward that way, if you share the link, that's more than enough. Of course, feel free to follow us on Instagram as well. I'm at young.brando on Instagram. Basil is at Basil's underscore, right?
Yes. Yep.
Basil's underscore Bezels. And Basil's underscore Bezels at Basil's underscore Bezels is also Basil's Bezels YouTube channel. So feel free to follow that as well. Basil, you have a wrench, so feel free to drop those links as I talk about the last watch of the day. Drop your links, I mean, of course.
Sure.
This is a piece that was consigned by Mark Cho. He is, as you might know, the owner of the menswear joint, the Armory, which has footholds in Hong Kong as well as New York City. This was
Hey. I think you might have actually lost audio, by the way. I don't know if you can hear me.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Now you're good, yes.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. I don't know when I lost it. Um, so I do apologize at the end there. But yes, the last one we were talking about was again from Masa's pastime, a Japanese independent maker, but from a time when he was still accepting these sorts of commissions, which converts a 19th century 5-minute repeater pocket watch into this modern wristwatch with, of course, a very markedly vintage aesthetic in a 37 millimeter brass case. I was also saying I heard Maldives. I will get back to you at that Japanese maker who also was much less known and who also makes everything, if not everything, most everything, either by his own hands or sources them quite locally and regionally, as it were. I'll get back to you. I'm blanking out on the name, but it will come to me eventually. But Christian Klings and Hajime Asaoka come very close to my mind. Of course, Daniel Roth. I don't know what the waiting list is like, but his 2-minute tourbillons that are offered both in round case and the so-called violin case, which I affectionately call the jelly bean. Those watches should be around $250,000 or a little more by now, and he makes 2 or 3 by hand every year. Again, I don't know what the waiting list is like. I don't know what the lead time is, but those are, again, cheaper than a Roger Smith. And that goes by the name of Jean-Daniel Nicolas. But yes, this is tonight's coverage. Again, I don't know where I lost the mic. I don't know when that happened, but thank you for staying with me. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for hitting the likes. We had already said our goodbyes, but I want to recognize everyone who has contributed in the earlier stream, where Basil was so kindly with us, as he was on this live stream. But there he unboxed 3 different watches. That doesn't happen all that often. Welcome back, Basil.
Hey, thanks.
So if you want to check that out, if you want to see what he has unboxed, feel free to hit this link that I'm going to share now in the chat. But before we say goodbye, I want to say thank you again to Loose Tooth, OC, Captain, MCM, Chalk Flew Up, and Travis Watts for contributing today. Again, if you haven't hit the like button already, please do so on your way out. Leave a comment after the live stream ends. That gives us maybe an extra boost. In either way, thank you, Basil. We will see you in the next one.
You bet. And thank you for having me.
And until then, stay safe, stay healthy, wear and enjoy your watches. Thank you.
Catch everyone later. Bye.
Bye.